So in this video, we are going to be talking about adding integers. So you are all probably familiar with adding numbers, right? Adding whole numbers and everything. But in this video, we're going to be talking about specifically adding integers. Now, what is an integer? So integer is any positive or negative whole number. Now, you already know how to add positive whole numbers. But the part that's new here is adding negatives. So here's where it can get slightly tricky. So for today, we're going to be doing quite a few examples where we have to add positive with a negative or negative with a negative. So when we're using, since we are just starting to learn about how to add integers, right? We're going to use two blocks. So throughout the notes, you're going to notice a blue block, which is representing a positive 1. And you're going to notice a pink square, which is going to represent a negative 1. Now, these are blocks that are going to help us to visualize this scenario. So, first example, let's do 1 plus negative 1. And what does that do? So, here, I use parentheses. Most of the time, you might not see the parentheses, but most of the time, they do put that parentheses just to make it easier to identify whether or not this is a negative number. So right now we have a positive 1. So this is positive 1. So we have one blue block. And over here, we have a negative 1. That means, now if I'm adding, I have a positive. Let's use the number line to visualize this scenario. Right now, I'm on positive. Let's make this a 0. This is 1. And this is a negative 1. Since this is a negative 1, what I like to do, think of it as a minus 1, right? Negative, right? So right now, I am at right over here. If I'm adding negative 1, I'm actually not going over here. So I'm not going over here. I'm actually going backwards. So from here, if I take 1 back, think as minus 1, I'm here at 0. Right here, we have a positive 1. We're getting ahead of the race. Think of it getting ahead of the race by 1 point. And then going back to where we were. So we have our no gain or no loss. So right now, we're just at 0. Neutral number. It's not 0 is not a negative number, nor really it is a positive, but it's just 0. So right here, we had 1, and then we went back 1. The easiest way I like to think about this is, since this is addition, and today's lesson is about adding integers, I like to reverse it. In my head, if I say negative 1 plus 1, it makes the scenario a lot more easier to visualize. Because now I'm in the number line, this is negative 1, and this is 0, and then this is 1. If I'm right here, and if I add 1, that's 1 unit over here, it's 0. It's a lot easier to visualize. Now let's do another scenario where this time, negative 4 plus negative 3 equals. Now this time, it's a lot easier. Why is this a lot easier? Because we have two negatives. Think about when you were in elementary school, you had to do 4 plus 3. It's literally the exact same concept, but this time just that there's a negative sign. But that negative sign really does not change anything. So think we have 4 red blocks, pink blocks, and the 4 pink blocks represent negatives. And then we are adding 3 more pink blocks. All I gotta do, since they're both the same color, there's no blues. All I gotta do is add them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's 7. But since they're all pink blocks, I'm gonna put that negative sign. So the easiest way, 2 negatives is always gonna be a negative. When you have a negative whatever number plus a negative whatever number, your answer has to have that negative in there. And then all you gotta do is just add the 4. So right here, 4 plus 3. What's 4 plus 3? 7. We put that 7 there. So we had negative 4 plus negative 3 I like to do is just like to circle those negatives, and I like to put them right here in my equation because they're both negatives. I like to put them over here, negative, so I don't forget about it, and just add how I regularly do it. 4 plus 3 is 7. And I took care of the negative sign. So our final answer is -7. Let's do one more scenario. And this time, let's do -3 plus 2. So here I didn't actually use the parentheses. Now let's use 3 negative. And then I have 2 positives. For this, these cancel off because a negative and a positive, that's 0. Because this is negative and is 1, positive 1, that's 0. I'm left with just a -1. Because remember, the red the pink represents -1, the blue represents +1. So right now I have -1. Now the thing to think about this is we have, whenever you're negative, so think of it again as a number line. Think of it as a number line. I have -3, -2, -1, 0, and yeah, we're going to stop there. And I'm going to take the -3. I'm at -3 right now. And if I'm adding 2 whole numbers, that's 1 unit, 2 units. I'm left with -1. So my answer is -1. Again, so this is pretty simple, straightforward. I like to do, if you haven't, you can refer back to absolute value video. Think of the absolute value. Whatever number has the greatest absolute value. In this case, the -3 has greater absolute value. So whatever number has the greater absolute value. In this case, -3 had the greater absolute value. That sign overtakes the other sign. This is a 2. Think about this as a +2, right? And this is a -3. Which number has a higher absolute value? -3 has absolute value of 3, and the 2 has an absolute value of 2. -3 wins. So since this is number 1, we're going to take this value. Is this a positive or negative? It's a negative. We're going to write that negative. So whatever one has a great absolute value, that sign overtakes. Let's say if it was -1 plus 2, 2 had a great absolute value. So our answer would be a positive. So right now, -3 is a negative number and it has a great absolute value. Our final number has to be negative. And once you take care of the negative sign, just forget that there's a negative sign. Just write that out there. And just think, and you would just do it out. Then you would do 3 minus 2, which is 1. And you would get that 1 there. And negatives in my head, I usually think of the opposite. So if I'm -3 plus 2, I'm really just minusing 3 minus 2, which is 1, and I would just put the negative sign in front. So let's do one more example. And let's do 5 plus -3 and equals, again, so we're going to start with the positive. So we have 5 positive blocks. Then we have 3 negative blocks. Remember, -1, this positive one, -1, just cancels out. That's a 0. Same thing goes here, cancel out. I am left with just 2 blocks, and they're positive, so my answer is positive 2. Another way to think about it, since this is just adding, when there is right over here, this right over here, it's just really, it's just 5 minus 3, really. You could think of it, right? Because you're just really subtracting, and you can also think of, which number has a great absolute. Right here, you don't see a value, but if there's no negative or positive sign, just think of it as positive. So, mine has the greater absolute value. So, pretend that there's an addition sign, a positive sign here, taken care of, right? It's been taken care of. And now what we do, you just subtract 5 minus 3. That gives me 2. So I've taken care of that. So hopefully this video helped you better understand how to add integers. And in the next video, we will be talking about subtracting integers.